hear that the judge was saying that the issues we raised are all issues of law. And next thing he had done is that he had authorized the clerk to write the JFK to do an examination of the defendants regarding the sodomization of the defendants' allegation and the torture. And so he said that is a factual issue. The only disagreement we have here is that we want an independent medical examination. We want a psychiatrist, we want a psychologist, a medical examiner to examine these guys.
Do you have
That's
a fear?
the exception we had with the judge. That's what happened today.
Do you have a fear relative to the examination?
JFK is controlled by government. That's the reason we said. You remember in the courtroom we said we need an independent. Because you're talking about psychological torture. If somebody is physically harmed, they have other consequences. They suffer emotional distress, mental anguish, pains, and sufferings. And so that trauma, you need a psychologist involved. You also need a psychiatrist involved. The JFK does not have a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So what we need now is that we are asking the court to, that's why we are asking the court to
Chief, you argue about child to be tenants. That was denied. Knowing fully well that the court talks about no life stream. What do you think you want that child to become that?
What we brought before to the court's attention is that this is not the only court that in Liberia you have here. They have proceedings that are not televised. When we were arguing the Funaki Kofa's case, recordings were allowed in the Supreme Court. It's not all of the time. It's not all of the time. But there are sometimes because of the public interest nature. Because the purpose, if you go further on, the purpose in the contemporary times is that you find out that it leads to transparency, it gets to, it enhances community engagement, it enhances the public information regarding the transparency and accountability of the process. So you observe that these are laws that were made way back, and so sometimes the judges can decide, some courts can decide. Now, we are not in the only country. There are other countries in the United States, in other African countries, they televise these certain cases. Okay, so it was just a question of the judge to see whether he could exercise his discretion. The same way the judge has the authority to exercise his discretion in the approval and the denial of bond when somebody poses a criminal appearance bond. So that was not an act or an intentional question of disrespecting the rules of court. It is left with the discretionary authority of the court to say no. So what we just expected is that when the judge says, if the judge says no, it's no problem, we don't have problem.
So relative to...
But we thought that it was important that maybe the public would follow it, like you have to the National Elections Commission. Majority of the cases that are heard at the National Elections Commission, election cases that come at the level of the Supreme Court, they are cases that you guys can go and tell about. I give you an example, the Ide Bungalow case was the present vice president who was senator at the time, in my election. I represented the former vice president. The present vice president, when you're contesting for the senatorial position. That entire trial was televised. It came at the level of the Supreme Court. So these are just questions that you will ask the judge to exercise his discretion. It is not with the intent to undermine the integrity of the court, because every lawyer is an arm of the court and must keep the dignity of the court and protect it. So it was not in bad faith.
Relative to bringing in independent medical practitioners, will you trust the government to bring in their own independent?
No, we say independent. The court will do that. We will make that decision. That's why we ask the court. The reason we accepted is that we are asking the court to appoint an independent medical examiner, because the defendants are saying they don't trust JFK because government regulates JFK. That's what they say, and we speak through they speak through us. It's not our own statement. We are the employees of the defendants. So whatever they tell us to say, but when it is signed in law, we got to bring it to the attention of the court for the court to take decision. That's all.
So that was the voice of Councillor Arthur Johnson, counsel for defendant in the Capitol building alleged arson case here at Criminal Code A. So earlier today, defense counsel filed in the motion filed a motion for open trial, but the motion was being denied by the court. But the motion was being denied by the court. He filed a motion for open trial, and then Judge Roosevelt Wade denied the motion, citing that will undermine the integrity of the court. Citing that will undermine the integrity of the court, so the motion for an open trial was being denied, and then the motion that was being filed on Tuesday by defense counsel to allow the motion that was being filed by defense counsel for the court to deny evidence that were being submitted by state lawyers was also being rescheduled for next Wednesday. So earlier, Judge Roosevelt Wade announced that he was giving his ruling in the motion that was being filed by defense counsel, but today he has rescheduled it to Wednesday, next Wednesday. So we are still here awaiting. No, not it. I'm in orange. So we are awaiting the defendant to leave the court to go back to the Monrovia Central Prison. Amos Kofa has joined the 6 other defendants who have been kept at the Monrovia Central Prison. So Kofa joined those defendants on yesterday after he was being arrested at the local toll border there in Nima County. So today in court, defense lawyer, counsel of Arthur Johnson filed in a motion in the court to grant an open trial, but the motion was being denied by Judge Roosevelt Wade, and Judge Wade was to give ruling in a motion that was filed on this Tuesday by Councilor Arthur Johnson, querying the court to suppress evidence that were presented by state lawyers. The motions were rescheduled for next Wednesday. So we are still here on the grounds of the Temple of Justice here in Monrovia. Seven. There were 6, and then Amos Kofa joined yesterday, so that's 7.
Yesterday,
they were yesterday, but they joined yesterday. We arrested them in the back, and then saying the court yesterday. We saw me yesterday. So we are still awaiting the 7 defendants who have been kept at the Monrovia Central Prison. So they will soon leave the court to go back to the Monrovia Central Prison. It seems that they are there. It seems that they are there. They usually don't spend a long time in there. It appears they are there. So we are still awaiting the defendants, the 7 defendants who have been kept at the Monrovia Central Prison. It will soon be going back to the Monrovia Central Prison as the trial continues here at Criminal Court A on the grounds of the Temple of Justice. We are still here on the grounds of the Temple of Justice.
So we stay awaiting the 7 defendants who are in there. drop in the comments. Let's get your own view. Let's get your own view on this entire process. Here's the questions. Why the judge denied the request? This is not the first time where the case, some case should be televised.
Yeah.